Tell me her name." The man's voice came out wet, blood on his teeth, both hands zip-tied behind his back, kneeling on concrete that hadn't been swept since the Clinton administration. Darius Kane crouched down until they were eye level. He didn't raise his voice. He never raised his voice. "Last time," Darius said. "Her name? I don't. I swear to God I don't know who." Darius stood, straightened his jacket, looked at Marcus over the man's head, and gave one small nod. Marcus stepped forward, reached into his coat, and placed a photograph on the ground directly in front of the kneeling man's face. A little girl, 6 years old, ponytails, a pink backpack, standing outside PS 124 on Mott Street. The man's breathing collapsed. "That's your daughter," Darius said, still calm, still quiet, like he was discussing the weather. "She walks to school alone every Tuesday because your wife leaves for the hospital at 6:15. You knew that when you decided to work for Victor Rallis. You knew that when you decided to betray me." Silence swallowed the room whole. "Now," Darius adjusted the cufflink on his left wrist, the tail of a dragon tattoo coiling up from his forearm, disappearing beneath rolled silk. "Her name." The man broke in 4 seconds. "Nyla," he whispered. "Nyla Rivers. She saw the drop. She was never supposed to be there, I swear." "Thank you." Darius turned and walked toward the door. Behind him, Marcus cut the zip ties. The man wasn't worth a body. He was worth exactly nothing now. But Nyla Rivers. Nyla Rivers was a different calculation entirely. 22 hours earlier. Before we go any further, if you're already hooked, you already know what kind of story this is. Hit that like button right now and drop your city in the comments. This story belongs to all of us. Let's go. Eclipse Club existed in a legal gray zone that the city of New York had been too embarrassed to address for 11 years. It sat below street level on Fulton Street, 3 blocks from the old financial district, unmarked except for a steel door painted matte black and a bouncer named Theo who had never, not once, smiled at anyone. The music inside was the kind that gets into your chest and stays there. Nyla Rivers was on stage at 10:47 p.m. on a Thursday, and every single person in that room understood, whether they admitted it or not, that she was the reason they were still there. She moved like she had made a private agreement with gravity. Every line of her body was deliberate. There was no performance in it. Or if there was, it was the kind of performance that transcended itself, that forgot it was performing and became something else entirely. Something real. She wore gold. She wore confidence like a second skin. And she was studying fluid mechanics at NYU on a partial scholarship under a name that wasn't exactly hers. In a life, she was building one careful brick at a time, and not a single person in Eclipse Club knew any of that. Darius Kane knew none of it yet either. He stood in the back of the room, half in shadow the way powerful men often are, not because they are hiding, but because the shadow simply arranges itself around them out of respect. He had a glass of something dark in his hand that he had not touched in 20 minutes. He was watching her. Marcus Vance appeared at his shoulder the way Marcus always appeared, without sound, without announcement, like a weather system. Rallis moved on the Tribeca warehouse. Marcus said quietly. 3 of our people confirmed it. He's running a new supply line through the piers. I know. You want me to. Not tonight. Marcus followed Darius' gaze to the stage. He studied the situation for approximately 4 seconds with the practiced eye of a man who had watched Darius Kane make decisions for 9 years. She's trouble, boss. Every interesting person is. I mean specifically. I heard you. Marcus said nothing else, because Marcus was pragmatic enough to know when a conversation was finished. Darius set down his untouched drink. He crossed the room. Nyla noticed him before he reached her. That was the thing about being a woman who had learned danger the hard way. You developed a kind of peripheral awareness that most people didn't have. You noticed exits. You noticed hands. You noticed when the temperature of a room shifted because someone powerful had decided to move through it. She was at the bar by then, a glass of water in front of her, her wrap around her shoulders, hair still warm from the stage lights. He sat down one stool away, not crowding her, Not performing distance either. Just there. She didn't look at him directly. You can sit somewhere else, she said. I could, he agreed. His voice was low, even, like a tuning fork struck once and left to resonate. She looked at him then, because the voice made her. Some voices do that. She looked, and she saw the jaw first, sharp like something carved, and then the eyes, which were the particular dark brown of old mahogany and twice as unreadable, and then the arm resting on the bar, the left arm, where a dragon began at his wrist in black ink and climbed. You own this place, she said. Not a question. Among other things. Then technically I'm sitting in your seat. Technically, he said. You can stay. She held his gaze for a moment. Most people, she had noticed, couldn't hold this man's gaze. They looked away, or they looked down, or they found something fascinating on the opposite wall. She didn't. I'm not interested, she said pleasantly. In what? In whatever this is. He almost smiled. Not quite. I'm Darius Kane. I know who you are. Then you know I'm not sitting here to flirt. Men who aren't flirting don't come sit one stool away from a woman they've been watching for 40 minutes. The almost smile got closer to actual. 20 minutes. 40, she said. The mirror behind the stage catches the back corner. Silence. She picked up her water. He turned his glass slowly on the bar. You're smart, he said. I'm also tired, and I have a 7 a.m. class, and I'd like to finish this water in peace. He stood, buttoned the middle button of his jacket, looked at her one more time in that way he had, like he was filing something away for later, something precise and important. 7 a.m. is early, he said. Yes. Good night, Nyla Rivers. He knew her name. She felt the cold of that travel all the way down her spine. She did not let it reach her face. Good night, she said. She watched him walk away in the mirror behind the bar. She watched until he disappeared into the back corridor. Then she set down her water glass very carefully and sat very still for 15 seconds while she decided how alarmed to be. Pretty alarmed, she concluded, but not running alarmed. Not yet. The next morning, the city was gray and wet and absolutely indifferent to everyone's problems. Nyla sat in a lecture hall on Washington Square and took notes in the margins of her textbook and thought about the way the dragon tattoo moved when he flexed his hand. She didn't want to think about it. She thought about it anyway. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't open it. Asterisk eclipse. Tonight. My office. Not a request. Asterisk. She stared at the text for a long time. Then she typed back. It sounded like one. 3 dots appeared immediately. Consider it a strongly worded suggestion. She put her phone face down on the lecture hall desk and tried to focus on fluid dynamics. She failed completely for the first time in 2 semesters of near-perfect focus. She went. She told herself she went because you didn't refuse Darius Kane, because the calculus of her particular situation, the new identity, the past she was running from, the careful invisible life she was constructing, meant she could not afford to make enemies of men like him. She went because she was also, despite everything, curious, which was a dangerous thing to be. His office was above the club floor, up a flight of steel stairs, behind a door that looked unremarkable and was probably 3 inches of reinforced steel. The room inside was different than she expected. Books. Real ones, not decorative, their spines cracked and soft from reading. A drafting table covered in architectural schematics. A single lamp throwing amber light. No desk imposing itself between them. He was standing at the window when she came in, looking down at the street. Sit anywhere, he said without turning. She chose the leather chair farthest from the window. He turned when she sat. He had changed from last night. No jacket, white shirt with the sleeves rolled, and the dragon tattoo was fully visible now, starting at his wrist and climbing past his elbow, the head of it disappearing beneath the folded cloth at his bicep. It was extraordinarily detailed. Someone had taken many hours on it. What do you know about Victor Rallis? He asked. That was not what she expected. The name, she said carefully. More than the name. She looked at him. Why would I know more than the name? He sat down across from her, leaned forward, forearms on his knees. This close. She could see that he was younger than the reputation suggested, mid-30s, and tired. Not visibly, not in a way that telegraphed weakness, but in a way that lived behind the eyes, the particular exhaustion of someone who had been keeping everything together by sheer force of will for longer than was sustainable. Tuesday night, he said. The parking structure on West Street. You were there. Her stomach dropped approximately 4 floors. She kept her face arranged. I parked there. You don't own a car. I was. Nyla. He said it quietly. Just her name. But it landed like a hand on her shoulder, stopping her. I'm not accusing you of anything. I need to know what you saw. The room held its breath. I saw 2 men exchange a case, she said finally. I was cutting through to the street. I shouldn't have been there. Did they see you? One of them looked up. He was quiet for a moment. Processing. Dark coat. Scar below the left eye. She nodded once. Darius sat back. He rubbed the back of his neck with one hand. And it was such an ordinary gesture, so unexpectedly human on this man who was supposed to be made entirely of controlled authority, that she felt something shift slightly in her chest. Just slightly. That man works for Rallis, Darius said. Which means Rallis now knows there was a witness. Which means I have a problem, Nyla said. Which means we have a problem. Though we sat in the air between them. She didn't challenge it. Challenging it felt like the wrong move and also, confusingly, like something she didn't actually want to do. You're not afraid, he observed. I am, she said. I just don't perform it. He looked at her the way he had looked at her the night before. That particular filing away attention. Where are you from originally? Everywhere. Meaning you don't want to tell me. Meaning I've moved around. Running from something. Aren't most people? He was quiet a beat. Then, unexpectedly, yes. Just that. One word carrying far more weight than its size. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. That was the strangest part. Silence with a man who controlled half of Lower Manhattan's underground economy, who had just told her she was a target, who had a dragon climbing his arm and secrets behind his eyes. And it was not uncomfortable. She stood before it could become anything else. What happens now? Now I handle Rallis. And me? He stood too. Same height. Which surprised her. She had expected him to be taller somehow, though he was already tall. Up close, the lamp throwing amber between them, he was very present. Like a physical fact. You, he said, come back tomorrow. Don't go anywhere alone tonight. Marcus will have someone near your building. I don't need a babysitter. No, he agreed. You need someone who can shoot straight at 3 a.m. Those are different things. She picked up her bag, walked to the door, stopped with her hand on the frame. The tattoo, she said without turning around. Dragon. What? The pause behind her was exactly long enough to be interesting. My mother used to say, he said, that a man with no visible fire gets burned by everyone else's. She had it done for me on my 18th birthday. She turned to look at him over her shoulder. He was watching her with that dark mahogany gaze, and there was something in it now that hadn't been there before, something undefended, brief as a window opening and closing. She sounds smart, Nyla said. She was. Nyla nodded once. Walked out. She did not sleep well. She lay in the dark of her studio apartment on Chambers Street and listened to the sound of the city and thought about the man in the parking structure who had looked up, about the case he'd been holding, about what was in it. She also, despite her best efforts, thought about a woman who believed her son needed visible fire. At 2 in the morning, she got up, made tea, and sat at her kitchen table with her textbooks open and her mind only half on them. Through the window, 3 stories down, she could see a black car idling at the curb. It had been there since 11. She should have found it threatening. She found it, quietly and against all reasonable judgment, something like reassuring. Victor Rallis had been expanding for 8 months. That was the actual problem, not the warehouse, not the pier, not any single incident. It was the pattern. Rallis was a careful man who moved slowly and covered his tracks well, and he had identified Darius Kane's operation as the most valuable thing in Lower Manhattan and decided, with the patience of someone who believed he would eventually win, to dismantle it from the edges. Darius had known this for 6 months. He had been managing it, blocking each move, redistributing resources, making sure his people were protected. What he had not accounted for was a woman in a gold wrap at the bar who looked at him in the mirror and said 40 when he thought he'd been subtle. What he had not accounted for was caring that she was in danger. He sat across from Marcus in the back room of a restaurant in Red Hook that had the best calamari in Brooklyn and served as a reasonably safe place to have conversations that could not be had elsewhere. "She's clean," Marcus said. "New identity, but clean construction. SSN traces back 18 months. Before that, he set a thin folder on the table. Gone. Darius didn't open it. "She's a person, Marcus, not a profile." Marcus looked at him, said nothing. "Rallis knows she saw the drop," Darius said. "He'll move on her within 48 hours to find out what she knows and whether she's talked. Then we move first. Or we end this. Rallis, the whole operation, before he can get near her. That's not 48 hours of work." "No." Darius picked up his coffee. "But I know someone who's been wanting Rallis for 3 years and doesn't have enough to move yet." Marcus understood immediately. He did not look pleased about it. "Agent Clark," he said flatly. "She's not going to like it. I'm not going to like it either. But Nyla is." He stopped. Marcus waited. This was unusual. Darius Kane did not typically trail off mid-sentence. "She's exposed," Darius said finally. "And it's because of proximity to me. I fix that." "You fix it," Marcus repeated carefully. "Or you keep her close enough to feel like you're fixing it?" The silence that followed was the kind that made Marcus think, not for the first time in 9 years, that his boss was the most dangerously self-aware man he had ever met, and also the most stubbornly resistant to that self-awareness when it involved things he actually wanted. "Set up the meeting with Clark," Darius said. "Secure line. Tonight. Tonight." Marcus stood, collected the folder. "At the door, for what it's worth." "It's not," Darius said. Marcus left. Darius sat with his coffee and looked at the middle distance and allowed himself, for approximately 90 seconds, to think about a woman who didn't perform fear and stood her ground against a man everyone else stepped around. Then he put it away and made 3 calls and began dismantling Victor Rallis' operation from the inside out. The afternoon Nyla almost didn't come back to Eclipse was the afternoon she found the note under her apartment door. Asterisk, "We know you were there. We know what you know. Come alone to Pier 42 at midnight, or we start with the girl from your Tuesday class who walks you to the subway." Asterisk. Her hands were steady. She had learned, from the worst teacher available, how to keep her hands steady. She took a photo of the note. She sat on her floor for 3 minutes. She thought about her Tuesday classmate, a 20-year-old pre-med student named Dana who had absolutely nothing to do with any of this. Then she called the number Darius had sent her at 8 a.m. that morning. Not his number, a different one, for emergencies, and said 4 words. "Pier 42. Midnight." Note. His response came back in 6 seconds. Asterisk, "Don't move. I'm coming to you." Asterisk. "I'm not going to wait in my apartment," she said. "Nyla, I am going to Pier 42. You can either know that and plan around it, or not know it and be unprepared. Your choice." A very long pause. "You are," he said quietly, with something in his voice that sounded almost involuntarily like respect, "extraordinarily difficult." "I know. Marcus will be at your door in 8 minutes. Do not leave without him." 10 minutes, she corrected. "I need to change my shoes." She hung up, changed her shoes, left a glass of water on her kitchen windowsill. 3rd floor, visible from the street. A signal she devised on her own, the kind of habit a woman builds when she's been in bad situations before and learned to leave breadcrumbs. Marcus arrived in 9 minutes. He looked at her shoes, flat, rubber-soled, practical, and nodded once in what she understood was professional acknowledgement. "He's meeting us there?" she asked. "He's already there," Marcus said. Pier 42 sat on the Hudson like an old wound. The rain had started an hour before midnight, and it had turned the river into hammered silver and made the pier planks slick and dark. Darius was standing near the water when they arrived. Not hiding, not taking cover. standing in the rain with the kind of stillness that said he had surveyed the entire area already and decided exactly where he needed to be. He looked at Nyla when she came off the walkway. A long, brief look, the kind that measures and finds things intact and doesn't say what the finding means. Two of Rallis people, he said quietly. East End, near the old dock structure. They've been there 20 minutes. They're watching, Marcus said, waiting to see if she came alone. Darius looked at Nyla. Did you leave anything? A signal? Something to indicate where you were going? She blinked. Glass of water. Third window. He nodded slowly, and she realized he understood exactly what that was and why. My people are on the east approach, he said. When I move toward the dock, you stay behind Marcus. Not because you can't handle yourself. He anticipated her. Because if something happens to you because I positioned you wrong, I won't recover from it. The rain fell between them. She absorbed that sentence and what it cost him to say it. Okay, she said. What happened next took 11 minutes and felt like 11 hours. There were raised voices, then silence, then a brief exchange of controlled violence that she only half witnessed from behind Marcus' substantial frame, and then quiet again. And then two of Rallis' men were being driven away in a black SUV to have a conversation with Darius lawyers about their future employment opportunities, or lack thereof. Darius came back with a shallow cut above his left eyebrow that he was completely ignoring. You're bleeding, Nyla said. It's minor. I know it's minor. You're still bleeding. He looked at her. She reached into her bag, always packed, old habit, and found a small packet of gauze. She pressed it to his forehead without asking permission. He went very still. Sorry, she said. Does that? No. His voice had shifted. Something quieter in it. It doesn't hurt. She held the gauze in place for a moment. Up close, in the rain, with the river behind him and the cut above his eye and the dragon on his arm dark with water, he looked, for the first time, like someone who could be tired. Someone who could be reached. Thank you, she said, meaning for tonight, for the car outside her building, for coming when she called. Don't thank me yet, he said. There's something I need to tell you. He told her in the back of an armored car headed uptown, with Marcus driving and rain on all the windows. Victor Rallis is not going to stop, Darius said. He knows you exist. He's going to keep coming back to that single witness until he's satisfied. And the only way to make him stop is to remove him from the equation entirely. And you can do that. Not alone. Not without exposing my own people to legal risk that I won't accept. He paused. There's an FBI agent, Simone Clark. She's been building a case against Rallis for 3 years, and she doesn't have enough. I have enough. Nyla was quiet. You want to trade information for protection, she said. For you and for anyone connected to you. Clean. Legal. Whatever past you're carrying. He didn't look away. That too. She felt the weight of it. Everything she had built. The new name, the scholarship, the studio apartment, the Tuesday class with Dana, the slow, careful reconstruction of a life after the worst year of it. Darius. She said his name for the first time. He noticed. She saw him notice. What you're describing means giving up your leverage. You use what you know about Rallis as a weapon. If you give it to the FBI, you lose it. Yes. Why would you do that? He looked at her for a long moment. Because I've spent 8 years building something that's mostly fear, he said finally. And there is not one single person in my life who would sit in the rain and put gauze on my head without me asking. He said it like it was a fact being filed away. Not a confession. Just a truth he was stating because it was true. And I'm not interested in losing that. The city lights slid past the wet windows. Imagine this. What if you were Nyla, sitting in this car, carrying this past, with this man telling you he'd burn his leverage to the ground for you? How do you choose between everything you've built alone and a man who makes you feel, for the first time, like you don't have to build alone? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you were in her shoes, what would you do differently? And if this story is landing for you, hit that like button right now. Stories like this exist because of you. Nyla looked out the window for a long time. Then, set up the meeting with Clark. He exhaled, barely, controlled, but she heard it. "Tomorrow," he said. "Neutral location. I'll have Marcus arrange." His phone vibrated. He looked at it. His entire face changed. Not dramatically, not in a way that would register to most people, but she was watching and she saw the micro shift, the tension arriving behind his eyes. "What?" she said. Clark moved up the timetable. He was already typing. "She's been running surveillance on Rallis for 72 hours. There's a window tonight. He's moving product. She wants the meeting now. Now. Now." Marcus, from the front. Location. Darius gave an address in the meatpacking district. Marcus changed lanes without signaling. The rain intensified. Agent Simone Clark was the kind of woman who made a room feel professionally evaluated the moment she entered it. She wore a gray coat and flat shoes and an expression of long-practiced neutrality that had probably taken years to perfect. She looked at Darius. She looked at Nyla. She looked at Marcus and then back at Darius. "You vouch for her?" Clark said. "I brought her," Darius said. "Which means yes." Clark sat, placed a recorder on the table, and then, making eye contact with Darius, turned it off demonstratively, setting it aside. A gesture of measured trust. "What I need," Clark said, "is the supply line. Physical location, schedule, names of handlers. If I have that, I can move on Rallis within 72 hours and the district attorney's office can keep him occupied for the next decade. And in exchange, immunity for your organization in relation to Rallis specifically. I'm not offering a blanket pass. Kane, don't push it. And for her," Clark glanced at Nyla, "I need to know what I'm working with." Nyla looked at Darius. He gave her nothing, no direction, no signal. It was her choice. He had arranged the table. He was not going to play the hand for her. She took a breath. "My name before the one I'm using," she said, "was Nyla and Morrow. 3 years ago in Philadelphia, a man named Dion Bradley tried to kill me in our apartment. He had done it before, twice. The third time, I fought back, and he didn't get up." She kept her voice level. "I ran. I rebuilt. I am not the same threat he was, and I never was." Clark listened, said nothing. Then, "Bradley's file has a note from the Philadelphia field office. Corroborating injuries. History of calls to the residence. There's an argument for self-defense that the DA there was already considering." She paused. "Give me Rallis. I give you a real name." Nyla felt it. The floor shifting under her carefully constructed life, but shifting towards solid ground rather than away. Darius placed a folded document on the table. "Pier 17, Warehouse 4C, Tuesday and Friday between 2 and 4 a.m. 3 handlers. Names and photos." Clark picked it up, opened it. Read it with the focus of someone doing a calculation. "Tuesday is tomorrow," she said. "Yes. This is enough." She folded it closed, extended a hand to Darius. He shook it, and then, unexpectedly, to Nyla, who shook it too. "Expect contact from my office within." The window behind Clark shattered. Glass across the table. Nyla was already moving, some deep animal reflex from 3 years of hard learning, dropping below the table line before the sound of the shot fully registered. Darius was moving too, not away from her, but toward her, one arm coming across and down, driving her lower, his body angling to put itself between her and the broken window. "Go!" Clark was on her feet, weapon drawn, shouting into a radio. Marcus had the door. In the chaos, glass, shouting, Clark's people materializing from the street, the rain still pouring. Darius was crouched over Nyla in the corner behind an overturned table, his hand on her head, his mouth at her ear. "Are you hit?" "No." "You?" "No." Clark, on her feet. "It's okay." She could hear his heartbeat. He was that close, and it was faster than it looked from the outside. He was afraid. He was just afraid in the contained way he did everything. She put her hand on his arm, on the dragon. He looked down at her hand, and something in his face went very quiet, the way a city goes quiet at 4 a.m. when everything that's been running all day finally takes a breath. Rallis, she said. Rallis, he confirmed. Clark will have him by Tuesday. And then, he looked at her for a moment in the blue and red light beginning to come through the broken window. He didn't answer immediately. He was, she had learned in the space of 2 days, a man who didn't say things he didn't mean and didn't mean things he wasn't prepared to stand behind. Then, he said, you finish your degree. You get your name back. And if you want to disappear from all of this entirely, a pause. I'll make sure you can. And if I don't want to disappear, the light moved across his face. Then I'll still be here, he said. Whether that's a good thing or a very complicated thing remains to be decided. She almost laughed. It surprised her, the almost laugh arriving in the middle of shattered glass and police lights and a night that had been terrifying in 3 different ways. You, she said, are very complicated. I know. I don't scare easily. I know that too. Then stop looking at me like I'm something you're about to lose. He held her gaze. That dark mahogany gaze, fully open for once. No calculation in it. Just him. The man whose mother gave him a dragon at 18. The man who kept books with cracked spines. The man who put himself between her and a sniper's bullet without deciding to. Just did it. Because the body sometimes knows things the mind is still arguing about. Old habit, he said. Break it, she said. 3 weeks later, Victor Rallis was arrested on 47 federal counts at Pier 17 Warehouse 4C at 2:40 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. The case Clark had been building for 3 years was complete within days. Darius Kane's name did not appear in a single document. Nyla Moreau, her real name, returned to her by the Philadelphia DA's office in a quiet administrative decision that received no press, sat in a lecture hall on Washington Square and wrote notes in the margins of her textbook and thought about nothing except fluid mechanics for the first time in 3 weeks. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Except she knew the rhythm of it by now. Asterisk dinner. Tonight. Not a request. Asterisk. She looked at it for a long moment. Typed back. Asterisk still. Sounds like 1. Asterisk. 3 dots. Consider it a strongly worded invitation from someone who'd like to learn what you're studying. She looked at the message. At the window. At the gray sky above Washington Square Park where pigeons were performing their indifferent circles. She typed. Asterisk 7 p.m. I choose the restaurant. Asterisk. His response was immediate. Deal. She put her phone away. The lecture resumed. She took notes. The city moved outside the window, indifferent and relentless and full of danger and possibility in equal measure, the way it always is, the way it was long before either of them arrived in it, and would be long after. But tonight, she thought, dinner. Tonight, just that. She chose a small Haitian restaurant in Crown Heights that had no ambience worth mentioning and extraordinary food and absolutely no one who would recognize Darius Kane. He showed up in jeans and a dark jacket, dragon tattoo visible below his rolled sleeve, and sat down across from her at a table the size of a cutting board. He looked at the menu for a long time. Order for me, he said. You trust my taste. You kept your head in a firefight and left breadcrumbs in a rainstorm. Yes, I trust your taste. She ordered for both of them. The food arrived. They ate without performing anything. He asked about fluid mechanics, and she explained it. Actually explained it. And he listened with the focused attention he seemed to give everything. And she thought that this was a strange thing, sitting here. Strange and not unwelcome. You're going to keep running this city, she said at some point. Not a question. It's what I do. And that's not going to stop being dangerous. No. She looked at him. He looked back. I'm not afraid of complicated, she said. I know. But I'm not going to disappear into someone else's orbit again. Not for anyone. I wouldn't want you to. He said it simply. You're far more interesting when you're in your own. She ate. He ate. The restaurant was warm and the food was extraordinary, and outside the window Brooklyn went about its loud, indifferent business. She felt. She took inventory, because she was a careful person, not safe exactly. Safety was a thing you built slowly, over time, in small increments. and she knew better than anyone that it was never permanent. But she felt something adjacent to it, something like the possibility of it. That was enough. For tonight, that was enough. Later, much later, she would think about this. The moment you decide to let someone into the careful architecture of your rebuilt life is not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It arrives the way the morning does, gradually, and then all at once, and you realize you've already made the decision. You just hadn't said it out loud yet. She hadn't said it out loud yet. But walking out of that restaurant into the Brooklyn night with him a step beside her, not in front, not behind, beside, she thought that the saying out loud could wait. Some things deserve to be felt before they're named. His hand found the small of her back as they reached the street. Brief. A question rather than a statement. She didn't move away. "You think you can escape me," he said quietly, some private amusement in it. "But I always find you." She looked at him sideways. "You've been saving that line since the parking structure on West Street." She laughed. A real one. It surprised them both. The city moved around them, noise and light, and the endless forward motion of New York that doesn't pause for anything, least of all two people standing on a corner in Brooklyn figuring out what they are to each other. She didn't have an answer yet, but she was, for the first time in a long time, not running from the question. I've been told I won't reach my 1K subscriber goal because people don't care about stories like these. But guess what? I'm here to prove them wrong. If you want to be part of this journey and show the world that we can make this channel grow, hit that subscribe button right now. Asterisk.